Hi, in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this circular pattern in the background and how to bring in the type and the border with the picture and how to make this smoke or fog in the background. So we'll start with a blank document and we want to put black in that background. In order to do that, push Shift and Delete or Shift and Backspace if you're on a PC, and that brings up the Fill Layer dialog box. And just make sure black is here in this drop down menu and click OK, and that fills it with black. Now to make those swirls in the background, we're going to use the type tool, and we'll just click right here in the middle and type Halloween. Click the check mark to accept that, and let's move it right into the middle. Now in order to make that circular pattern, we're going to use a filter, and to use the filter we're going to need to simplify this layer. But if we simplify this layer, then this type won't be editable anymore. We want to keep that type editable. So what we're going to do is make a copy of this layer, and we'll be able to simplify that copy. So in order to make a copy of this layer, make sure that layer is selected and hit Command or Control J, and that gives us a copy. Now we can come up here under Filter, Distort, and we're going to go to Zigzag. Now here's where it's telling us that we need to simplify that layer. So click OK. And make sure that this slider is all the way to the right and this slider is all the way to the right. And make sure that you have a round center here. You have these other choices, but for what we're doing now we want this around center. You can see kind of a preview of what it's going to look like. Click OK, and there you go. Now we can still see Halloween in there, and that's because this layer is still visible. So let's click that eyeball right there to click that off, and there's what our Halloween turned out to be once we ran that filter. So now let's do another filter on that. Let's go up to Filter, Distort, Twirl, and just make sure that this slider is all the way to the right and click OK. Now let's do that one more time. Filter, Distort, Twirl, and make sure that's all the way to the right. Click OK. Okay, now let's just enlarge that just a little bit. About like that, and we'll just slide it up, move it up just a little bit. Something like that. Okay, let's click the check mark. Now we need to bring in our type. So we have the type already right here. Let's go ahead and make another copy of that. Command J or Control J, and we'll turn this original one back off. Let's move this layer on top of our circular pattern, and let's move the type up to the top, and let's put an arc on it. So let's go to the type tool, go down here to the warp, and we'll give it a little bit of an arc right here, and that's too much. Let's bring it down using this slider, something about like that. Click OK, and let's just move it just a little bit, a little more centered, maybe down. Okay, right there. Now let's get our type tool again, and we'll click right down here towards the bottom, and we'll just put in the year 2020 with the check mark, and let's move it over just a little bit like that. Okay, there's our swirl and there's our type. Let's bring in a picture. I have a picture open. We'll go down here to the photo bin. It shows you all the pictures that you have open. Just drag it up into our artwork and let it go. Now it's a little bit too big, so let's size it. You can do that by dragging these handles. See the little squares in the corner? These are called handles, and if you just click it and just drag it in a little bit to size it. Now we want to rotate it just a little bit. To do that, see how you get the curved double-headed arrow when you're on the corner? Just drag it around and that will rotate it. We want that to be about in the middle of our circle. And right now our circle is on top because the layer's down here on the bottom. Let's click the check mark to OK that. And let's drag that layer up to the top. You can see when you drag it, see how the space in between, the line in between the layers gets dark and thick. That's where you want to drop it. So we'll drop it right there. Now it's right on top. Now we want to bring in a border. Let's grab this border right here and we'll drag it in. Now it's much smaller and it has the same handles here, so let's just drag those handles, make it bigger. Now we need to distort it a little bit because we have a landscape photo, so let's just drag this middle one out and we need to rotate a little bit and just keep working it until you get it in the right position. Rotate it a little bit more, bring that down. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm going to accept that. Now we have this part of the picture outside that we need to get rid of. We're going to do that with a layer mask. The way to do that, we need to make a selection of the inside. With the border layer selected, click on the magic wand tool. Make sure it's the magic wand down here. And just click on the inside of that border. Now it says that we need to simplify that shape. Click OK. And now see how it's made the selection inside? The little marching ants show that that's selected. We need to enlarge that selection just a little bit so that the border will for sure overlap that picture. So go ahead and come up under Select, Modify, Expand, and we will just expand it about 10 pixels. Click OK, and now you can see how it's inside of that blue border, and that's what we want. Now to make our layer mask, we need to make sure we're on the picture layer and come up here. This is the layer mask icon right there. Just click it and it makes the layer mask. The way a layer mask works is what's black on the mask is hidden, what's white on the mask shows through. Now we need to change the color of that border because we don't want a blue border. We want it to be orange like the rest of it. So let's make sure that that border layer is selected. And then let's go over here. There's our orange already. That's what we want. Just click on the paint bucket and click on that border and that turns it orange. Now let's put a stroke around some of that type and around our border. So let's click on the type. We'll start with the 2020. Let's go up to Layer, Layer Style, Style Settings, and we're going to give it a stroke. Now we don't want a black stroke because that's not going to show up very well. So let's click on that color and that opens the color picker, and as you move your cursor over the artwork you can see that it turns into an eyedropper. So just let's go ahead and pick this orange that we've got here, but we want to make it a little bit lighter so you can see the stroke. So you can just click right here in the color window and just drag it over and it'll change that color so that it's just a little bit lighter orange, and click OK. And now we want to give it a size, so let's give it, let's see, that's way too big. Let's go down. Let's go about 18. That looks good. Click OK. Now we want to put that same stroke around these other things, the Halloween and around our border. We don't need to do the layer style again. We can just copy that same layer style to these other layers. To do that, hold down the Option, or if you're on a PC, hold down the Alt and click on that FX and just drag it down to the Halloween layer. And see how it put that on the Halloween layer? Let's do the same thing with our border. Hold down the Alt or the Option, click the FX up to our border. Alright, now you see it's on the border, but it's on the inside of the border also. That may be what you want. I don't want it there. I just want it on the outside of the border. So I'm going to throw away that FX. Just grab that FX and bring it up into the trash. Now what we want to do is combine those two layers together, and an easy way to do that and still keep them editable is just select both of them and let's put them in a group. This is the group icon right here. If you click on that, that put them both into this group. Let's name that group Picture and Border. Let's copy that effect onto that group. Hold down the Option or the Alt on a PC and click on that FX and drag it up right onto that group. And now that stroke goes around the outside of the border and not on the inside of the border. That background squirrel is a little bit too bright for my liking, so I'm going to click on that layer, which is the swirls, and I'm just going to lower the opacity just a little bit, just to lighten it up. Okay. Now we need to make the smoke, or the fog, whatever you want to call it. Let's create a new layer right on top, because the smoke is going to be on the top. Let's make our background color and foreground color the default, black and white. You do that by clicking on this little icon right here is the default. And let's go up to Filter, Render, Clouds. Okay, now that doesn't really look like clouds, but we're going to fix that. Click on the marquee tool over here and just select a section of that. Now we want to invert that selection. So go up under Select, Inverse. Now all of this area out here is selected and that's not selected. So we want to just delete. Hit delete or hit backspace and that deletes it. Hit Command D or Control D to deselect that. And now hit Command T or Control T. And all of these keyboard shortcuts are found up here in the menus. It's just faster to use the keyboard shortcuts, and I'd like you to learn the keyboard shortcuts if you can. These we use all the time. Command T or Control T brings up the transform, and we're just going to click on that handle in the corner and drag it out. And we're just going to enlarge this to fill the whole area. And this is going to look much more like clouds than that first one that we did, or fog, or smoke. Okay, now we're going to change the blending mode. Up here, this is the blending mode. From normal, click on that drop down menu and choose screen. And that makes it look more like fog. Okay, let's turn the opacity down on that layer just a little bit, because that's a little bit too much. Okay, something like that. Now the smoke is going over the whole thing, and we don't want that. We just want it to be in certain areas. So we're going to use a layer mask for that. And that's right up here again, layer mask. And we know that black conceals and white reveals. Right now it's all white, so you can see the whole thing. Make sure that black's our foreground color and click on the paintbrush. You want a pretty big brush. This controls the size of your brush. And we need a pretty big brush. And we need a soft brush. So go to brush settings and make sure that this hardness is at 0. If the hardness is up, let me show you what it does. We'll just paint on that layer mask. You get a really hard edge. We don't want that. Hit Command Z or Control Z to undo that and go to the brush settings. Make sure you have a soft brush right down to 0. And then come up here and start painting. We know we don't want it on this picture. So let's just paint it out on the picture. You can see over here on the layer mask how it's painting with black, and the black is hiding that smoke. So just go through and you can just click, or you can actually drag and paint. Just put it where you want it. Let's go a little bit over that type. Something like that. Now if it's still a little bit too much, you can go ahead and change the opacity, take the opacity down a little bit more. And there you go. Let's see how it compares to the other one. That's pretty close. The circles are a little bit different, but that's pretty close. And with a layer mask, if you make a mistake, just switch your colors. This curved arrow switches the colors. Now we're painting with white, and you can paint and see how it brings white back on there, and you can paint it back in. That's called non-destructive editing. You can change it back and forth and just add or subtract what you want. And you still have a lot of room over here, and down here. You can do journaling, or you can bring in other graphics or whatever you want to make this artwork your own. So that's our tutorial for today. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.